Good afternoon and welcome to the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce post-budget conversation with Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. I'm Krista Ross, CEO of the Fredericton Chamber, and I thank you for joining us today. This first federal budget since the pandemic began has been highly anticipated and has generated a lot of engagement over the past week. The K-shaped recovery, economic recovery, where some sectors are doing quite well and others are looking at years before they're fully recovered, makes it challenging to make the right policy decisions for supporting those that really continue to need it. There are many items of interest in the budget, but of course, what we always want to know are the details. And I'm so pleased to have Minister Freeland here today to provide some of those details and insight into the budget. Before I introduce the minister, I want to go over just a few details of the event today. Minister Freeland is going to speak first for about 10 minutes to give a brief overview of the budget, and we will then head right into Q&A. We've had a number of questions submitted in advance, but if you have other questions, please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get through as many as we can. For those of you joining on Facebook Live, we're not monitoring that feed for questions for the minister. So if you want to ask a question, join us in the Zoom feed by registering on our website right now. We're also recording this event and we're going to post the link on our website and share on our social media channels and in our weekly newsletter. So without further ado, I'm going to give you an introduction of the minister, and then I'm going to hand the floor over to her. Chrystia Freeland was first elected as a member of Parliament in 2013 and was subsequently re-elected in 2015 and 2019. From 2015 to 17, she served as Canada's Minister of International Trade, overseeing the successful negotiation of Canada's trade agreement with the European Union. From January 2017 to November 2019, she served as our Minister of Foreign Affairs. As the Foreign Minister, she led and successfully concluded the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And in November 2019, she was appointed Deputy Prime Minister of Canada and Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. In this capacity, she led the united response to the COVID-19 pandemic. She was appointed Minister of Finance in August 2020. And back in 2018, she was recognized as Foreign Policy's Diplomat of the Year. Prior to entering politics, she was an accomplished journalist and an author. She speaks Russian, Ukrainian, Italian, French, and English. Wow. She lives in Toronto with her husband and 3 children. Minister Freeland, I turn the mic to you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Krista, and thank you very much, Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. Ça me fait plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention. Et je veux aussi remercier mes collègues de notre caucus à Nouveau-Brunswick. Je pense qu'ils sont avec nous. Et j'ai travaillé beaucoup en étroite collaboration avec eux en créant ce budget. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very, very much for your time today. And I also want to thank the New Brunswick MPs who I think are here. So let me say hello to Dominic, Jeanette, Pat, Renee, Serge, and Wayne. And I want to assure you guys, the people of New Brunswick, that these guys were very, very diligent, persistent, determined in making sure that I was aware of the needs of New Brunswick and of Fredericton in putting this budget together. So I'll just make I'll try to keep my opening comments about the budget really brief because I'm most interested to hear from everyone who's here. I would say, when you go home tonight, maybe you are already home, and going home just means walking from one room into another. But when you end your workday today and talk to your family about today, if they ask you what you did today and you tell them about this meeting, I hope that one thing will stick in your mind. And that is that the focus of this budget is jobs and growth. That was sort of the bullseye that we were aiming for in all the measures that we put in place. That was very much our view that that's what Canada needs right now as we face, the biggest challenge our country has faced since World War II, the biggest economic contraction our country has faced since the Great Depression. So it's all jobs and growth all the time. And we divided that mission up into 3 parts. Part 1 is finish the fight against COVID. Now, you guys in New Brunswick and in Atlantic Canada, I'm talking to you from downtown Toronto. And from my perspective, I know you're facing a 3rd wave as well. But I have to say, from my perspective, bravo and congratulations. You guys have done a terrific job in fighting COVID. And by the way, I see that as a team effort of the entire community of all of Atlantic Canada. And I think it speaks to the strength of your community, because I think ultimately success in fighting COVID happens when you have a community that understands that you need to do things for each other. And you guys have demonstrated that in spades. So bravo. But the fight against COVID, even for you, is not over. You're feeling that now. And our government, our federal government, said when the pandemic began that we would do whatever it takes to support Canadians and Canadian businesses in the fight against COVID. Our view was this was quite different from an ordinary recession and was more like a natural disaster, more like a flood or a wildfire. And so we just had to be there to provide disaster relief to get our country through. And that job is not yet done. And so that's why a lot of this budget, a lot of the money in the budget is about continuing to support Canadians and Canadian businesses. Just over 30 billion of the $100 billion stimulus is devoted to that. So significant, but I think it is absolutely essential. That's part 1. Part 2 of the budget is recover from the COVID recession. We really have to remember, and Chrystia, I think you made such a good point in describing this as a K-shaped recession. That's exactly right. Some parts of the economy are doing as well as they were before, some parts even better than they were before, and that's true of some households. But other parts of the economy, other households are doing very, very badly. There are about 500,000 Canadians who have had a job before COVID hit, who don't have a job anymore. That's actually today, after some significant recovery, worse off than we were at the depths of the 2008-2009 recession. So we have work to do, and our government's view is what we need to do is support Canadians, support Canadian businesses, invest in Canada so we can come roaring back. We do not want this recession to linger. We want our economy to punch its way out of the COVID recession and as quickly as possible recover all of that lost ground from this pandemic year. And we think we can do that. We really do. I am so impressed at how resilient Canadians have been throughout the pandemic. And a data point that I think is really striking is actually in the 4th quarter of last year, pandemic still with us, vaccines just starting to arrive, Canada's GDP grew by 10%. Wow. And it's because of people like you, like the people who are in this conversation. Really, Canadian businesses, especially small businesses, have shown remarkable resilience and ingenuity. But I know you need support to get all the way back up. And that's our second key objective. And then the third big objective of the budget is to set ourselves up for higher, stronger, more robust long-term growth as a country than we had before. We see this as an opportunity to really invest in some long-term growth initiatives, to invest in higher productivity, to support businesses. One of the ways that businesses have gotten through COVID is by accelerating things like going digital. And so we really believe that now is an opportunity for the government to support businesses in making that push and emerging from this as a country stronger, more productive than ever, because that's how we have the long-term prosperity that we want for ourselves and our children. So that is the basic sort of core set of objectives of the budget. We believe that this budget will get us back. We promised in the throne speech to create 1 million jobs. We believe that with this budget, we will do that by the end of this year. And this budget creates 500,000 work and training opportunities. It has, I would say, some groundbreaking programs to support small businesses who have been hardest hit by the crisis, particularly in areas like tourism and hospitality that have been the hardest hit. So that's what we're trying to do here. And I am keen to hear your questions and to talk to you about the ways that we're doing it. Thanks a lot, Chrystia.
Well, thank you very much. And you did mention near the end, the tourism industry and the hardest hit. And our first question is actually from the tourism industry. One of the concerns of the tourism industry is that the economic effects of the pandemic will last far beyond the health threat. And even if all citizens are vaccinated by the end of June, it doesn't mean that people will instantly be traveling. And the industry expects another summer like 2020. And without the robust wage subsidy, many operators feel they won't survive. What plans do you have in place to support the tourism industry specifically?
So one of the major measures, thanks for the question, Chrystia, and I agree, basically. And so one of the major measures in the budget is extending our business support programs. They are now the wage subsidy, the rent support, lockdown support as well. Those programs are extended to the end of September. It's one of the most expensive elements in the budget. But again, I'm the finance minister. I watch every penny. But from my perspective, that is absolutely money well spent. We've also introduced a new program, the hiring credit, which runs from June through November. And that program is about helping businesses have the confidence, but also, frankly, the financial support to reopen, because we understand that that's a risk. It's a risk to take on new employees. And we want to share that risk with you and underwrite part of it. And the hiring credit is designed to be particularly helpful to seasonal businesses like tourist businesses. And again, that's on purpose. We know that's where the need is the greatest. So inside the design of that program, it's going to be targeted towards seasonal businesses. That's a lot of support. On top of that, though, we believe that tourism businesses need some special programs directed at them. And so there's more than $1 billion in the budget specifically for tourism that will flow through the RDAs.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And that's good information. I'm not sure if you're aware that Fredericton is considered to be one of the startup capitals of Canada. And with the universities and our knowledge park and all the different assets we have here, we're really strong in the startup sector. But a concern that we've had during the pandemic relating to the recovery and support programs is that new businesses or those that may have begun during the pandemic aren't eligible for the programs, even though they too are operating under pandemic restrictions. They're in a fragile economy. The issue is that they don't have comparative data for sales for previous periods. So what new initiatives do you include in this budget that could support those new businesses or startup businesses?
So that's a very good question, Chrystia. And let me just say that that is something that we as a government have wrestled with a lot, that I personally have wrestled with a lot. And the core challenge here is actually exactly the one that you named. And it really goes to an integrity challenge with government programs. As people know, in fighting this pandemic, the federal government has spent an unprecedented amount of money. And the lion's share has gone to support businesses and people through this natural disaster. We have a responsibility spending that much money to be confident that the programs are designed in such a way that they're going to the places we intend them to go. I believe that, the lion's share of Canadians are good, decent people. And I also think it behooves the government to design programs that are going to be basically effective. And the challenge with new businesses is without that pre-pandemic set of revenue markers, it's very, very hard to design a program that will cover them, that won't have obvious integrity challenges to it. So that's been what we've been struggling with. And I wanted to sort of dwell on that for a moment, just to help people understand why it's hard. Having said that, I am aware, Chrystia, of how entrepreneurial Fredericton is, and how entrepreneurial the people of Fredericton are. And that's great. And so what I would say to the entrepreneurs of Fredericton, both people who have started a business in recent months, but also I hope this summer, a lot of people are going to start new businesses, is I believe that this budget is the most small business, startup business, innovation friendly budget I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that a government of Canada has ever put forward. We put forward close to $5 billion in new support measures for business startups. And I'll just go through the top ones. That includes making financing conditions much easier for small business finance. It includes this new, and I'm very excited about this. I think this could be really transformational for a lot of small businesses, a new technology adoption program tailored specifically at small businesses, which we hope and believe is going to help more than 200,000 small businesses across the country. And the program is going to do two things. One, for the smallest businesses, there will be micro grants, just money that we give you for technology adoption. For larger businesses, loans on favorable conditions to adopt new technologies. But one thing that we've heard from a lot of businesses is when it comes to new technology adoption, it's not just a question of money. It's also a question of having the expertise. And so what we're doing is we're going to create a Canadian Technology Adoption Corps of young people. We're going to give them 6 weeks of training, and they are going to fan out to small businesses across the country and help them adopt new technologies. And the way I see it is, a lot of us know that young people help us adopt technologies in our lives. And we think they can really jumpstart Canadian small businesses. And who knows, these 30,000 Canadian young people might end up having a full-time job in that space. Chrystia just saw in our little private session before this conversation began, I have an in-house technology adoption corps known as My Children, and I was struggling with the audio, and I got my kid from the other room to come in and fix it. We all, the restaurant owner who has a niece who's great at computers. Well, now we can formalize having her come in and have that business go digital, or adopt other important technologies that will make it more productive. And we really believe that this is going to be kind of a permanent boost to those small businesses. The final element that I am very excited about for small businesses is we are increasing the amount of money that people can write off on their taxes for investments in making their business more productive. That level is going up to $1.5 million for 3 years. So it's a time limited offer, because I want to encourage you guys, all of you, everyone who's a member of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, take a look at these measures. Really, I believe, the Bank of Canada raised its GDP forecast for Canada for this year to 6.5% last week. That is suggesting we're moving into a very strong economic period. I really want to encourage Canadian small businesses take this opportunity, invest in yourselves. The support from the government is there to do it. And when you do that, you will make yourselves more prosperous, your community more prosperous. You'll create lots of great jobs.
Thank you for that answer. And I know you mentioned it is a struggle to figure out ways in which you can support the startups and those that don't have the track record. But I will tell you that here in Fredericton, we have over 1,000 members of our chamber. And if you ever wanted to have some insight or input from our startups, we'd be happy to organize another roundtable for you. The next question from the hospitality industry. The hospitality industry, as we know, has been one of the hardest hit through the pandemic. And we were a bit surprised that the budget 2021 didn't repeal the escalator tax on alcohol. Do you have any plans to remove this automatic annual escalator in the future?
So let me just say, for the hospitality industry, again, the extension of the business supports, which we talked about earlier, that's designed for you guys. You know, the hardest hit sectors in our economy are tourism and hospitality. Those supports are there for you through the end of September, and the hiring credit is there through the end of November. And please take a look at these programs. The hiring credit in particular is designed to especially help seasonal businesses. And again, on our small business support measures, look at those. I have talked to a lot of small businesses that have gone more digital during the pandemic, and let's lean into that now. There are programs to help you. In terms of excise tax and on alcohol, where we have provided support is more support directly to Canadian wine producers, because we realize that for trade-related reasons, the landscape has changed and they need some additional support. And so that is there going directly to the producers. And then the final thing I would say to the hospitality sector is we really believe that this is a year when there's going to be a strong desire among Canadians to buy local and to travel local. And there are some strong measures inside the budget, money devoted to local festivals, local events, which we really believe are going to add a further boost to Canadians traveling this summer within the country. We don't know what the international situation will be like. But I personally am very hopeful, with the vaccination campaigns really gathering steam, that this will be a moment when the rest of Canada can rediscover our own beautiful country. And in the summer, especially, where is more beautiful than Atlantic Canada? So I hope you'll have a lot of visitors, and I hope from the rest of the country, and I hope that will be a boost to tourism and hospitality.
Appreciate that. And we hope too that the borders are such and the restrictions are such that we can travel around the Atlantic region. And certainly we have launched a support Fred Local campaign. And I think chambers of commerce across the country have done such things. So we are certainly encouraging. And I would tell you that here in the Atlantic region and in New Brunswick, we have a huge and very strong craft alcohol sector. We have tons of craft brewers, distillers, cottage wineries, meaderies, cideries. So if you decide you'd like to come to New Brunswick this summer, we'll make sure that you are extended the hospitality of those. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit and ask about the proposed childcare plan. What is your expectation for the province financial contribution to the proposed childcare plan? Are we able to implement it with the promised $10 a day childcare independent of provincial contribution, or how will that work?
Thank you for the question, Chrystia, and I'll answer it in one sec. I just want to, having talked with enthusiasm, I think the cabin fever enthusiasm that all Canadians are feeling right now about traveling, I think I should say that obviously the pandemic is still with us. In fact, in many parts of the country, the third wave is more virulent than ever. And we do need to, all of us, follow our public health advice And, first we need to finish the fight against COVID, then we can go out and have fun. And I do really want to emphasize that Atlantic Canada has had among the strictest measures fighting COVID. I admire you guys and support you guys so much for putting those in place and for following those measures. And I want to be clear, I wouldn't want anyone to misinterpret my remarks to suggest anything other than the warmest support for those measures. But I think if we can all follow the rules, if we can get vaccinated when it's our turn, then the moment when we really can reopen will come sooner. So just wanted to clarify that. And on the childcare, Chrystia, thank you for raising it. It's an important measure in our budget. And, look, I am a feminist. And I believe in childcare as a feminist policy that Canadian feminists have been fighting for more than 50 years, that's going to improve the lives of millions of families and children across the country. But I'm also the Minister of Finance, and I put this measure forward in this budget at scale because of my long-term growth agenda. I really think as a country, we need to be focused on things we can do to improve permanently our growth trajectory. And I believe that getting a universal system of early learning and childcare in place across the country will do that. In fact, calculations that economists at the Ministry of Finance did federally suggest that this could be the policy with the greatest permanent economic impact on Canada since NAFTA. So we are really seeing this as an economic growth policy. And it's a growth policy, first and foremost, because it increases participation of parents, especially women in the labor force. We think it could permanently add about 240,000 people to the labor force. That's huge. It creates really good, well-paying jobs in early learning and childcare for the people providing that care. And looking further into the future, having a good system of early learning and childcare is an investment in Canada, in Canadians, and means that the kids who benefit from that will be even frankly smarter and do even better in their lives in contributing to the economy. So that's the economic case for it. How do we get it done? Well, for the first time, the federal governments have worked on it before. I really want to salute the work of Ken Dryden and of Paul Martin, who made huge progress in that direction. We are today putting forward even more federal support. So in the budget, we put forward $30 billion over 5 years with the commitment, as you said, Chrystia, that 5 years from now, we want every Canadian family to be able to have high quality, accessible childcare for an average of $10 a day. And you guys are next to Quebec, so you know that the system can work. And you know the impact it can have. And I think that's also I think that is another reason that I'm very optimistic Canada can get it done this time, because it's not just a theory anymore. There's a real example, your next door neighbors, that shows this can happen and it works. So next step, as you point out, Chrystia, working with the provinces and territories. This is not something the federal government can do alone, nor is it something the federal government should do alone. But we have now shown our seriousness with a serious financial commitment. And next step is to look for willing partners among the provinces and territories. And my pitch to my colleagues has been and will continue to be, guys, to the finance ministers across the country, you need this as much as I do. You need long-term higher growth. You need more revenues coming into your provincial and territorial treasuries. This is a measure which can do it. And the good news is the feds are footing a big, big part of the bill. So I really have a lot of appreciation, Chrystia, for Canada's federal system. We are a huge and diverse country, and the local needs are so, so different in every part of the country. And, my view is that we need to give the provinces and territories a little bit of time to see what we've put on the table, to think about it and absorb it. And we're now ready to start having bilateral conversations to listen carefully to what the local needs are. But I would also say to everyone listening, it's up to you too. And if this is something that you want in your communities, that you want not only for yourselves, my youngest child is 11. So this is not, my family has grown past this. But I want it for my kids. And if you want it for your kids and your grandchildren and your neighbors, and maybe for the people who work at your small business, then please help me. Talk to your local MPs, talk to me. And it's going to take a little while to build this. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some detailed, thoughtful conversations with provincial and territorial partners. But the money is now there from the feds. And if we have the national will to do it, I really believe we can get it done.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate that answer. It's going to be some advocacy from the provincial level or the local level to support that provincially. I'm going to take, we're getting lots of questions in our Q&A, so I do encourage people to put them in there. But I'm going to take one of the questions that's come in from the Medical Society. When the Government of Canada and the provinces set out to establish publicly funded healthcare, the expenses associated were shared 50-50. Now we see the balance has shifted to be 70% from the provinces. How do you view that shift? And should we rethink how healthcare is funded in Canada? And I guess I would add to that, do we tie it to demographic data? Our aging population means that we're actually disadvantaged here by a straight per capita formula.
So thank you for that question. And let me say a couple of things. So look, I think that COVID has led us all to both appreciate more than ever how essential Canada's healthcare system is, to be more grateful than ever for having a universal single payer system, to be grateful since this question comes from health professionals. Let me just say, thank you so, so, so much. I do calls pretty often with healthcare workers across the country, and those calls are the most humbling experience you can imagine. People often say to me, "Oh, wow, Chrystia, you must work so hard." I know that, I never work as hard in such grueling, draining conditions as any of Canada's healthcare workers. And I'm so grateful to all of you. And also really grateful to you for what I have seen over and over is the incredible compassion in such hard circumstances. And in many parts of the country, the circumstances are getting harder now with the third wave. So let me just say, from myself personally, and I think I'm speaking for millions of Canadians, we are so lucky to have the healthcare system we have and the healthcare professionals we have in Canada. Thank you so, so, so much. In terms of the funding of the system, our focus has been and continues to be now, while the fight against COVID is still on, it is finishing the fight against COVID and ensuring that that is fully funded. So last summer, we put forward the Safe Restart Agreement. That was nearly $20 billion from the federal government to support provinces and territories in the fight against COVID. A lot of that to the healthcare systems right at the beginning of the pandemic. We put forward an additional $500 million to provinces and territories, again, for the fight against COVID. As the third wave, you could see it coming in March. We realized that provinces and territories needed even more support. And so we announced that we would be sending $4 billion to the healthcare systems of the provinces and territories. That was just last month for that third wave, and another $1 billion to support the vaccination campaign. And then, of course, we have focused a lot and devoted a lot of resources to the purchase of vaccines. So on the healthcare front, folks have been support the systems and supply the goods, i.e. vaccines, necessary for this fight. And I think it's fair to say we've been there. 8 out of $10 spent in the fight against COVID, whether it is the healthcare fight or supporting businesses and people through the pandemic, have been spent by the federal government. We do very much hear the view that we need to have some longer term conversations about the sustainability of the healthcare system in Canada. And what the Prime Minister has said, and I very much agree with this, is let's finish the fight against COVID. Let's see where our healthcare systems are at that point. In addition to the immediate costs of the fight against COVID, there's also the costs of delayed elective surgeries, things like that. So let's finish the fight, focus on the battle before us, allow the dust to settle after that, and then have a really good conversation between the federal government and provinces and territories about what we need to do to support the system into the 21st century. And just, Chrystia, since you mentioned an aging population and how that is particularly the case for New Brunswick, I think that's a really good point. And let me mention a couple of measures in the budget specifically geared at our aging population. So one is $3 billion in the budget to support long-term care. And there's another $1 billion that was announced in the fall economic statement also to support long-term care. And that money hasn't yet been passed into law. So that means there's $4 billion coming, really significant. I know that our seniors, most of them, while they can, would very much prefer to stay at home and to age at home. But that can be expensive. And especially as you get older, it can become more and more expensive. And that's why one of the major financial measures in the budget is increasing the OAS by 10% for seniors who are 75 and older. That should be particularly helpful for communities that have more seniors there. And then just to help people get through sort of the last push of the pandemic, before that measure kicks into place, we are sending $500 each to all of our seniors over 75.
Thank you for that. I want to turn our attention again to our small businesses. And I want to ask if you can speak more about how small businesses in particular could benefit from the Canada Digital Adoption Program.
Okay, well, small businesses, not only in particular, but like the Canada Digital Adoption Program is specifically designed for small businesses, like not even specifically designed for, it is a small business program. And we're just standing it up, but we are moving fast on doing that. We need to get the budget passed to have it fully into place. There are some good signals around that. And what I would say is just get ready with your plans. And there are going to be two elements. One is you'll get, if you apply for the program and qualify for it, you will be able to get a micro grant of about $5,000 to help adopt new technology. And then with it, we are going to send these young technology and digital adoption trainers to your business, to you, to work with you, to help you adopt these new technologies. A lot of emphasis on digital, but not only digital. And then for bigger businesses, the medium-sized businesses, there will be larger loans that are available and an advisory service. So the idea is provide you with some money and also provide you with the advice to make the best possible use of that money. And I also really want to emphasize the tax expenditure element there, where we're going to really make it worth your while to spend some money. What we're saying is, let's encourage businesses to invest in themselves. As you pointed out, Chrystia, it has been a K-shaped recession. There are some businesses who are doing well and who have some money in their bank accounts. We are making it really advantageous from a tax point of view for the next 3 years to invest up to $1.5 million each year in yourself to make yourself more productive.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to throw a little plug in for an organization called Tech Impact here in New Brunswick, who is running a Digital Boost 2.0 program where businesses can get help funded by ACOA for a digital strategy. So it just was launched last week. And so I'll just give that a little plug as well.
Can I jump in there, Chrystia?
Yes.
And just say, if Tech Impact is on our call with us, they should get in touch with one of their local MPs or directly with my office, because this digital adoption program obviously is going to operate through community organizations. Mm-hmm. And so, especially since this is a recently set up organization, get in touch with us, let us know what you're doing, and maybe you can be part of helping us roll this program out for Fredericton.
That sounds great. Thank you. I'll make sure if they're not on the call that they hear about this. I want to tell you, you're probably aware of this, but in case you're not, our airport in Fredericton, YFC, has had up to the pandemic 9 years of year-over-year growth. We recently, with the support of all 3 levels of government, renovated our airport. It got completed during COVID. But that airport and many others have essentially been closed to commercial air travel for a number of months. And I want to know what in particular is included in this budget that will support airports like Fredericton.
Well, thank you for the question. And first of all, I do want to say I am very mindful of the hardship of the closure of travel. But I also want to say thank you guys for having the gumption to put that in place and stick with it. I think that it has really served your communities well in terms of really limiting the spread of COVID. For us to really come roaring back as an economy and society, we absolutely have to get air travel back. That is one reason that we are working with the airlines to support our airlines on terms that are also good for the people of Canada, as represented by the government. And I'm glad that we have an agreement in place now with Air Canada. But you're quite right, Chrystia, and that includes restoration of regional routes. You're quite right that the airports themselves are in need of support. ACOA has a fund specifically to support regional airports. It's called the Regional Air Transportation Initiative. And I would encourage Fredericton Airport, if they haven't already, to be in touch with ACOA to get support from that fund.
I appreciate that. And I am certain that if they are not, they will be immediately after this webinar. I want to share with you a question that's just come in from the Canadian manufacturers and exporters. First of all, they've thanked you for your time today and for the investment in their sector. But they asked you to consider the other side of the ledger for a moment. Their members in New Brunswick worry that with all the necessary spending to fight COVID, they'll have to deal with significant increased taxation. How will the government address this issue?
So I would say, if the manufacturers of New Brunswick, manufacturers and exporters of New Brunswick, look carefully at the budget, I hope that they will judge the tax measures that are included there as being very reasonable and fair, and very much about leveling the playing field for Canadian businesses. There's an emphasis on pursuing tax evasion and closing loopholes. That's something that I am keen on, because I think that for every business, for every Canadian business that is paying its taxes fairly, it's unfair that there could be a business that doesn't. And if we ask people to pay their fair share, and I think the lion's majority of Canadians do, it's the job of the government to be sure everybody is doing that. So that's why there's an emphasis on that in the budget. The digital services tax, which we have committed to introducing in January, is also important because it's going to level the playing field between Canadian and international companies. And I think that's something we are all particularly aware of, given that so much of the economy has gone virtual during the COVID period. Beyond that, sort of what I hear, Chrystia, in that question is maybe an underlying anxiety about whether the spending that we undertook last year and whether the spending in this year's budget is sustainable. That's what I think people are, quite rightly thoughtful about. And what I would say to everyone who worries about it, and I want to say I am at the top of the list of people who worry about Canada's finances. And I think that's quite right. I think if you had a finance minister who wasn't worried about your finances, you should be more worried. So I want to assure people I agonize about this a lot. And I am very confident that this budget that we have put forward is sustainable. And let me offer you just a few proof points of that. The first thing I would say is my belief, our government's belief, is that the best way to pay our debts is through growth. That is what we really need to focus on. And this budget focuses on it, with sort of laser focus. And that's why I'm really glad to hear all the discussion of small businesses. They are the heart of our economy. They're the heart of our communities. If they can become more productive, the whole country becomes more prosperous. So number one on sustainability is let's get Canada growing. My second point is that I want people to have real confidence in the care and the prudence which goes to putting our budget together. I obviously am a liberal. I think that won't be a surprise to people. But at the Department of Finance, we take a small c conservative approach when it comes to accounting. And I want to give you an example of that. So in this budget, we put forward our deficit. We presented what our deficit will be for the fiscal year that ended end of March 2020, 2021. And we had forecast that the deficit would be $381.6 billion. In the end, what we said last Monday is that the deficit will be $354 billion. Now, that is a lot of money, but it's significantly less than what we forecast. And it's actually less than what the Parliamentary Budget Officer forecast as well. And I mention that to you to give you some confidence in our forecasts and in the numbers we put forward. And then the final thing I want to say, just around the sustainability and the prudence of the plan that we put to Canadians last Monday, is this is a plan that really that says, yes, we need to spend some money now to finish the fight against COVID, and we need to invest in coming roaring back from the COVID recession. But this is spending for COVID And going forward, we have a very prudent plan. So for 25-26, between now and 25-26, we have a steadily declining debt to GDP ratio. Our debt just going down and down and down. It hits 49.2% in 25-26. And our deficit in 25-26 will be just over 1%. And all of those numbers, with all of those numbers, Canada remains the G7 country with the lowest debt to GDP ratio. So I know that we've spent a lot of money, and I think we're all conscious of that, but so have all of our peer countries. And we continue to have the strongest fiscal position of any of our peer countries. And I'm going to get you one other document I'm going to read from. So I have here the report that Moody's put out, the ratings agency, last week on our budget. And the headline is Federal Budget Supports Economic Growth and Aims for Medium-Term Debt Sustainability. That's a really good summary of the case I've been making to all of you today, and it comes from one of our ratings agencies. So I think that's pretty good confirmation.
That is good news. Going to go in another direction again. We've got a number of great questions still in the Q&A, and we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to try and keep them brief. We do have a strong not-for-profit sector here in our region, and in fact, more than 10% of our members are not-for-profits. Science East is a science center, an interactive science museum here in Fredericton, and they've asked, given the link between science education and technology, innovation, and new businesses, what support is there for science centers and other not-for-profits who support science in education and diversity?
Great question. Let me say a couple of things. One is, of course, our business support programs are also open to not-for-profits. So please be sure that you have looked at those. We describe them as business support, but they're actually organization support. So please look to see if you qualify. And those are very significant in terms of the wage support and the rent support that they offer. This budget also has significant support for community social organizations. There's a multi-million-dollar fund that we've put in place. Again, it's sort of a finish getting through COVID and recovery fund, because we're very aware that community organizations have lost revenue, both because donations are down. You guys don't need me to tell you, it's hard to hold the regular kind of events. And also because organizations that rely on the fees of people who visit them, those fees are down too. So there is a very significant social community fund, and that should help. And then finally, there's a fund very much modeled on the Canada 150 fund, designed to provide grants to specific community organizations that, as judged by people in the community, are important for community life. And that's very much about supporting our country as we come roaring back from COVID. And that could be useful for this your science center too.
I appreciate that, and I'm sure they will as well. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to let you have the final word. But my last question is, it's from Bio New Brunswick. The budget places a large emphasis on green recovery and green technology development and implementation. How can New Brunswick firms participate in greening the economy? Where do they go for support?
Okay, that's a great question. And I am really, really grateful for it, because the one area we haven't really covered is the significant investment that this budget makes in the green transformation. It is really key. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, I am earlier in April, there was the annual spring IMF World Bank meetings. So I participated virtually, of course, in a lot of meetings of the IMF World Bank, of the G7, of the G20. And in reflecting on those meetings, the conclusion I came to was, when historians look back on 2021, I think that they will certainly say it was the year of COVID, but I think they will also say this was the year that the world economy decisively switched to green. I really see that that is where the world is now clearly going. And so, of course, we believe in acting on climate change because it's the right thing to do. We want clean air, clean water for our children and grandchildren. But there is also today an incredibly powerful business imperative to be sure that Canada is on the right side of history when it comes to the green transformation. And that's why this budget makes a huge investment in the green transformation. I would say there are two areas where that investment is focused. One is we invested $5 billion in the Net Zero Accelerator to support industries as they go green. And that's on top of another $3 billion that we invested in December. That is run through ISED, the Ministry of Industry and Innovation. And I would say talk to your local MPs for access to that support. And then the other area, equally important, is very significant new tax incentives for the development of clean technologies and green technologies. So there I would say, particularly for the new startup businesses, that's an important place to look. And, Chrystia, I would also say, we tend to think when we think about green technologies about startups and new businesses, and that's quite right. But I also think as Canadians, we should really see a value in building the green economy on the foundations of the economic strengths we have today, on the foundations of our forestry sector, on the foundations of our ocean economy. And that's what the government support in these two areas is designed to do.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent answer. And I think that you've also encouraged some of those startups in our region and some of the more established business who are looking to do work in that area. So that's great. I'm going to offer you sort of the last word, and then I will wrap things up. So is there anything else that you'd like to add? Any questions I haven't asked you that you'd like to answer?
Look, I would be happy to talk about the Canadian economy and the budget all day long, but I know we can't do that. So let me just conclude by saying two things. The first is thank you very, very much. I really believe that our businesses, I would say, especially our small businesses, our entrepreneurs, have been heroic in getting through the past year of COVID. People have been so resilient. People have been so innovative. Business, as a business journalist, I remember writing many times that businesses hate uncertainty, and I think that's true. And this year has been a year replete with uncertainty. And I just really want to say thank you for the way that you have risen to that challenge. And, I wish I could be in a room together and see the resilience in the faces of everyone on this call. I can't do that, but I do see the resilience in the numbers. And the way the Canadian economy has gotten through COVID so far is really a testament to your work. So thank you so, so much. And then my second closing thought is really to offer tremendous optimism to everyone. There really is light at the end of the tunnel in terms of COVID. It doesn't always feel that way right now as we're fighting a virulent second wave, but vaccines really are coming now to our country, and the level of vaccination is increasing really, really fast. And we can see that that does allow us to get on top of this virus. And I really believe that having done, I would say, economically, such a great job of getting through. We've avoided deep economic scarring to the economic tissue of Canada. So I think that because of that, and also, because of just the tremendous capacity and potential of our country, I think Canada is extremely well positioned to come roaring back from the COVID recession, and for this to be the beginning of a really great period of prosperity for our country. And I'm counting on you guys to drive that, because at the end of the day, maybe this is a third thought. I believe that the federal government can support businesses. We can create conditions which help you to grow and prosper. We can make investments which help you to do that. We can create, as we've spoken about, some tax incentives today. We can put in place some tax incentives which encourage you to invest in yourselves. But at the end of the day, Canada's prosperity, Canada's swift recovery from the COVID recession, our long-term growth, it's going to depend on you guys. So thanks in advance for all the hard work that I know is going to go into that. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. C'était une excellente conversation et j'ai hâte de vous visiter à Fredericton et de boire le bière duquel Chrystia a parlé et de parler avec vous. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And we also look forward to a time when you can come and visit us here in Fredericton. We have so much to show you. We really appreciate you giving us shedding some light on some of the programs that we've heard about with the federal budget. It's not an easy task to balance the ongoing needs of Canadians and businesses while at the same time keeping an eye on debt and our future stability. And I would have to say, I agree with you that businesses in our region, and in fact, from coast to coast, have shown such tremendous resilience and leadership. But our communities have as well, because they have stepped up and supported those local businesses like at no other time. And we want both the resilience of the business to continue, but we also want to encourage our communities to continue to support those small businesses going forward. It's a great trend. I want to thank everybody who attended today. I want to thank you for submitting great questions. It's really awesome for us to see our members with such a high level of engagement and interest in the budget. And like you, I could talk about the Canadian finances, the budget, and all of these things all day, but I know you have a schedule to keep. So I would encourage those of you on our webinar today to check out our website for other upcoming virtual events, our member benefits, our advocacy work. And Minister, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to shed more light on the budget for our members. So thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.